Hey guys, on this episode of the Identity Jedi Show, it's a fantastic conversation with Ian Glazer, and it's not all identity. To be honest, this is one of the many things I love about podcasting and creating these different shows is really the conversations and wherever they can go. So, little heads up, we talk about a lot of stuff. We talk about life, managing transitions. Of course, we talk about identity. So, hope you enjoy it. See you in the next one.
All right, so what are we supposed to be talking about?
Yeah. So pretty much, really, I wanted to just kind of catch up with you on, it's been, I think the last time we talked about this, I think this was, maybe I did the pod when I was at Cell Point, but one, just your thoughts on IDPRO now, right? It's now, I'm going to say this wrong. Is it 3 years in? Or is it 5?
Oh, no.
It's longer than that?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we will have been incorporated, I believe, 7 years in June. And then the run up to that was 4 or 5 years in various parts and pieces. So as a corporate entity, as an organization, it's about 7 years come this June. Okay. We will hit a very important and more than a little terrifying milestone. The board terms are June to June. They're 2-year terms. And there is, by design, term limits. That's why I'm not an active board member currently, is because I wanted, when I wrote the governance docs, to ensure that we had a mechanism by which there was always going to be new blood coming into the org, part one. Part two, I strongly don't believe that an organization that requires a specific person or persons in specific positions requires them to be there in order to be successful is an incredibly weak organization. It's fragile. And the only way that I could see, maybe wrongly, to change that was be like, okay, I'm going to build an enforcing function. Like, here you go. So the milestone is that of the original board that we sat when we first started, the last 3 members will term limit out this June. And so Sarah and George and Andy will roll off. And we will have a board that is not the first wave of the organization. And that's an incredibly proud moment, selfishly speaking. It's, I'm sure, scary as heck for Heather Vescent, who's our executive director, the board members that are currently on that have been on it. Like, everyone's like, oh goodness, like what happens? But at the same time, like there's a real power in knowing, like, hey, none of this is written in stone.
Right.
What, the organization wants to do, how it wants to go about it, what it finds important, those things have to change over time. And people need to come into the organization and help do that. Now, look, there's care and feeding, right? There's the keep the lights on kind of work. But beyond that, it's what's going to be important. And the only way to do that is to, in my opinion, change out the personnel who are acting as fiduciaries, who are acting as that board and to look over things. So it's a pretty big moment coming this June. I'll be curious to see the new board members. I will be very excited to welcome them onto the board. So board members who want to, after they term it out, they can go to what we are lovingly calling Emeritus Island. So right now, it's Steve Hutchinson, it's Lance Peterman, and it's me. It's Alan Foster. And so we joke that we have like these great tiki drinks and we're just sitting there like, how did we get on this island and how do we get out? But like, so people will be allowed to come join us. But the mission there is, as an emeritus member of the board, you have an obligation to do something, right? You can't just sit on the island and drink the tiki drinks. You've actually got to go do something for the organization in whatever capacity, right? And because it's not like you get term limit out and then you're like, well, that's it. This identity thing's dead. I'm out of here, right? Like, I'm going to go check out, I don't know, firewalls. I hear they're cool again or something. Like that's probably not going to happen. So like it's an interesting vehicle to have people who've gone through an experience in a leadership position for the organization come back in a different capacity and help out. And so I'm going to be very curious to see how the next 8 weeks unfold for the new board, but I'm super excited to see who those new members are. I'm also, full disclosure, on the nominating committee who helps build the slate. And there are some wonderful people on this year's slate, as we always have year over year. I'll be very excited to see who the board selects.
Interesting. So with this kind of big moment coming in June, if you take me back to when, you were just now digging into this and saying this is something we want to do and create, if you look now, would you say that it's accomplished some of the things that you wanted to accomplish? Has it, not accomplished some things? Like, where do you sit looking at it and go, hey, this was a good one. We were able to do these things, or hey, we set out to do these things. It quite didn't turn out the way we wanted, and here's some areas we can get better. Like, what's your take on it?
When I see people in the IDPRO Slack workspace who I don't know, ask a question and insert luminary name here, rolls out and be like, oh, well, this is my experience. Like that to me is we succeeded, right? At the very least, the organization is helping people connect with peers and learning and giving people opportunities to give back. That's the minimum bar. We're doing a lot more than that. It's doing a lot more than that. The body of knowledge, the many articles that we have and we continue to build on, is incredibly powerful. And there's an interesting thing. Every year, as you know, we do a skills diversity and programs survey, and I'm writing it up again this year with Andy Hindle. And one of the things we see, this is a little sneak peek into this report, is growth in the number of respondents who have been in the industry 3 to 5 years. And that's interesting in and of itself. Like, okay, look, people are coming into this and they're sticking with it for some amount of time. But the really interesting thing to me is we also ask what would be useful in your career. Now, peer-to-peer networking is like the number one thing, has been, no big surprise. Right, yeah. But what's interesting is what's happened in the second position. It used to be that vendor neutral training material was the second choice. And then it was mentoring and I think certifications. What we saw this year was that vendor neutral training materials dropped a position and certification moved up into number 2. We double click on that and we say, okay, well, let's look at the cohort that said they've been in 3 to 5 years. And they're the ones that are more interested in certification than almost anyone else.
Interesting.
And so I have a pet theory which says 3 to 5 years. What else is 3 to 5 years old? Oh, IDPRO is, and the BOK is, body of knowledge is. Like maybe, just maybe, what we are seeing as respondents who are a generation of identity practitioners who have grown up with some of these things, so to speak, and they're looking for different things. They're looking for ways, the certification, for example, to differentiate themselves in a tough job market or a very frothy job market, let's say. And that's really different than someone who's like, look, I've been, a SiteMinder expert, and I just kind of want to know more about federation as a whole, right? Those are two really different people coming at the problem and space. And so I am incredibly heartened when I see results like that in the skills survey that show the idea of providing that neutral, trusted material may actually be working, and we're actually starting to see real quantitative data to show that. I think, to the fullness of your question, embarking on the certification in the CIDPRO was a big goal. And I distinctly remember the board meeting where we said, we're going to allocate the funds to go do this. And we knew there was risk. But Alan Foster wisely spoke up and said, well, if we're going to fail, right? If this is going to break us, I would rather do it doing the mission of the organization, doing what we said we were going to set out to do, as opposed to just sort of fading into irrelevance. Right? Okay. Now, was that task way bigger than we thought? Oh my gosh, yes. In so many different ways. but we've still succeeded, and we've started to see a growth in the number of people that have their CIDPRO certification. I think the lesson for me, and it shows up too from my day job experiences. As much as this sounds crazy, starting is easier than finishing, and starting is awfully hard.
Yeah.
But finishing, like actually finish something strong and proud versus saying, and it just kind of the volume goes down and it just sort of is like, okay, and like fade to black. To really finish something strong is people do not necessarily know. And there's sometimes no way to know at the beginning how hard it is to actually do year 5 of that multi-year thing, whatever it is. And it's just a good reinforcement of like, okay, to your point about time, got a limited amount, can't stockpile it. Does this organization, does this company, does this division, whatever, do we want to spend the time and the effort to do this thing knowing it will be harder than we expect? And it will take longer than we expect. Not because we're not smart people, because that's how it works.
Right.
Do we want to spend time doing this? Is this worthwhile? And be proud of that work. And it's just a good lesson. It's just a good reminder, because so often it is easy to lose focus, your own, your organizations, your teams, what have you, because there's 7 different lasers out there and you're just one cat. You're like, oh my gosh, which one am I going after? And so that focus, that like, hey, no, those are cool. Yeah, those things are neat. Man, so many neat things to learn and do. Can we finish those strong if we started? Probably not. Okay. Well, then what does that tell us? I'm like, I don't know. I'm in a moment too in my own career where I'm like, all right, well, what do I want to start that I can think I can finish strong with? And that's an ongoing question. There's no hard answer to that. And it's always a personal answer, or your team's answer, your division or your group or your company. Yeah. But it's an important one to ask, right? Because if you're going to take something on and mean it, and I'm, and here I'm talking about like, you're going to mean it, right? Like, right, yeah. You can half-ass start, which means you're going to quarter-ass finish. Like, but if you really mean you want to do this thing and you're in it, like what you're doing with Identity Jedi and all the other things you're working on, like, do you mean it? Do you want to spend the time doing it? And to do that, you got to be kind of ruthless about what you're not going to do. And that's hard.
Yeah. One of the few nuggets that I will take, that I took from my time at AWS, was ruthless prioritization, right? Like you're going to find things where everything's number one. Everything's got to be done right now. And it takes that really seared focus to just go, okay, but I'm going to pick 1 to do right now, and 2 to do in this month, 3 to do in this quarter. And that level of yes, and knowing that some of these are going to quote unquote hurt. Like, but this is really cool. Like, I really want to go do this, but like, that's the point, right? And getting good at that is hard. I bring everything, maybe to a fault, but I bring everything to a personal journey. Like I look at anything that I'm learning. I think the way my mind is built, I need to understand every aspect, like the bigger picture as well, to understand the small thing that I'm doing. And what that taught me, learning how to do that, was that, okay, it's having a real look in the mirror and asking myself, when I have things and I feel like I don't want to make a decision, I want to do all these things, I start asking myself, like, what is it? Why is it that I really want to do this? Do I really want to do this, or do I just like this? What do I like about it? What aspect of it excites me? And then I start to kind of pull that out and realize that, okay, yeah, I just like the idea of this. I think this is pretty cool. I could get that same feeling I'm getting from maybe like just being an observer and say, hey, I'm going to support, right? And maybe that's doing a check-in, or like, hey, I'll be a cheerleader, great, and then go focus my effort to what I really need to do somewhere else. But it really, it's taking that time to understand yourself and really look at something and saying, but what is it that I really want to get to? And I love the way you put it, like, can I finish this strong? I love that. I'm going to steal that from you and kind of add that.
Well, so culturally at Salesforce, it was known that if you put up a slide and it has bullets, those bullets are in priority order. And if you put up a slide where those bullets are not in priority order and someone asks and you answer truthfully, you will get a, oh, okay. Can you talk me through that? And if you answer, oh, no, they're not. Then back in the day when, and this story comes to me from a very trusted source, so I believe it, when Salesforce was much smaller and Parker Harris was head of engineering, co-founder of Salesforce, head of engineering, and you put up like, here's the 3 things we want to do in the release. He'd be like, priority order? He'd be like, oh, you know what? Shoot, Parker, I didn't get it. Okay, cool. Well, let's do it right now. And he would bubble sort in front of the whole room because you would review your roadmap in front of the whole engineering and product organization back in the day when it was small enough. Be like, is this more important than that? No. Okay, is this more important than that? And go through that exercise live. And now there's a profound number of things about that, but that just mindset of here's a list. Now, in HTML land, it is unordered list. BS. It's ordered. It is ordered.
Right.
And knowing that's the expectation. And even if you're starting like local scale, right? A line product manager who's just like, okay, well, I want to get these 4 things done in the release. Here's my list of things. And their direct manager, right? So pretty far down in the food chain can just be like, is this the priority you're going to schedule the work in? Is this the priority order of importance? Is this the customer's priorities? Is this yours? Is this engineering's? What is this? Talk me through it. Is a really powerful exercise.
Yeah.
And it just sets a default setting of like, there really are no unordered lists. Like if you think about your to-do list, there's an order to it, right? Yeah. It's not just a heap where you're like, I'm just going to reach in and do one of these things at random. Because they're usually multiple things connected to it. Like, oh, well, no, sequencing wise, I can't do that. Or this, fun, but not really leading to anything. All right, I'm gonna put that back on the heap, right? There are orders to these things. And just being more conscious of how you prioritize. And everybody's got their own system. That is fantastic. Knock yourself out. But like actually being conscious to the way by which you do that. And I happen to be tuned to this because I have a little bit more free time on my hands. I've been like, all right, I'm going to rethink my productivity tools. Like, what is my tool belt that I've been using? Because some of the tools I've been using are like Bronze Age. Like I busted out one of them being, I will admit it, BB Edit, which is like the most badass text code editor on the Mac going back like 2 decades. I busted that out as a note-taking tool, and like my good friend and boss at times like, holy Wayback Machine, man. Like, really? I'm like, yeah, I tried Evernote. It just didn't work for me. I don't know. But like, I'm like, all right, I'm rethinking all of it. And so like hearing people's like, how do you manage to-dos? Like I've tried a variety of techniques. They seem overkill. Like I don't need a goddamn Gantt chart. It's just going to lunch with a friend, but still, how do I do that? Right. And so like, I'm really attuned to that right now. And it's interesting to be like, oh, that's my process. Huh.
So I've used the slight plug, right? So it's Motion, which is a calendar kind of task, management system, and it claims all this stuff, whatever, uses AI because everything does now, right? But I will say what I love about it, which works for me, is that I will sit down, I'll come up with a bunch of tasks, right? So I'll make my little task list, whatever. And to your point about everything, usually does have an order, right? Even though you may think it doesn't. And so what I'll do is like, okay, I need to do this, and you get this done by this date, and I got to do these things, whatever. And I'm really good about in the moment when I have something, I'll be like, all right, what are the steps I need to complete? And so I can break out this task, all little subtask, all this stuff, whatever. And then Motion takes and just like schedules it across my calendar. But the thing that it also does is because, slight ADD, which gets worse as I get older, is that I will look at things and be like, all right, well, I'll dig in, I'll knock things out. Okay, done. And then there'll be another one that I'll just be like, especially if it's around writing, if it's anything that's creative, then if I get going and I'm like in a good creative mood, I will go grab something that's maybe like scheduled for like Wednesday and be like, no, I'm going to grab this now because I know how hard it is for me to get in a specific mode. And I'm really like, I'm on it right now. Like, okay, good. So like, I'll grab all my writing tasks and pull them. And so what Motion does is like, once I do that, like it automatically just rearranges and moves my schedule, right? And if I miss something, like say something comes up and I have to do a Zoom call or a meeting, okay, well then I'll slide this in there and it'll automatically bump it down and like just keep rearranging. So for me, I can pull it up and it's always there. It's like I don't get that crap. Here's all these things I was supposed to do and they're not done. Yeah. Like, nope, I'm just gonna move over here, move this here, which for me gives me a very calm feeling of like, okay, I got it. It's scheduled. And my biggest thing is that I do so much that I have that fear. I've had it since I was in college. I should probably talk to my therapist about this. Like I just have that fear. It's like I'm forgetting something.
Yeah.
What like?
Can I propose something just about that? You're saying like ADHD as you get older, it gets worse. I would propose something slightly different, which I'm
Marijuana?
observing in myself right now, which is you go hard for years in a workforce. And whether you realize it or not, you become a dopamine addict.
Yeah.
You become addicted to getting things done. Now, in a more traditional corporate work environment, that could be as trivial as like, I did 10 back-to-back meetings. You're like, I mean, I guess you get the cookie for that, but like, I don't know. But you get addicted to the little dopamine hit of doing a thing. And when you are confronted with a little bit more time and your body physically reacts to that, where like I call it task seeking, where now it's like, what are the random things that I need to do? Ooh, like my stack of like beat up ball caps in the corner here. I'm looking at it right now. Like, is that modern art? What is the purpose of that? I should clean that up, right? Total task seeking, right? Like there is little to no impact of me taking that task will have on anything else or my well-being or anything else having to do with anything. It's literally like doing something to do something. I am told, I don't know if this is true, maybe we can phone in Nat Sakamura for this, that there is a word in Japanese which is basically you are eating because your mouth is bored. Right? Task seeking. Like, all right, I'm gonna go do this thing. Why? Oh, but I could get it done real fast. That is pure task seeking. That is pure I just need a hit of dopamine.
So totally agree. I've experienced that this first quarter of this year because, January 13th, I wake up and I'm like, I own all my time. I've got nothing to do. This is okay. So, I was like, all right, I took a trip and then I came back and I'm just kind of like, I told myself, I was like, all right, don't jump back in anything. Like, I'm going to give myself a solid month. That seems like a good time. That's not a lot of time, but it's, dude, by the fourth day, I was going nuts. Like, I was like, I sat down and I was like, all right, look, I will, I think I watched everything that Netflix ever made, ever. And it's this weird feeling that I did it. I remember there was one day that I literally watched Netflix all day and I felt like utter crap. I was like, you lazy son of a, you didn't do anything today.
Yeah.
Like nothing productive.
Yeah.
How did this add to and it's just, the inner voice is just beating the hell out of me. How did this add to anything you're doing? And I'm just like, you know what? And it was like at the end of the night, I was getting ready to go to bed. And people listening, or if you're watching this, welcome to Dave's inner monologue. So I go to bed and I tell, inner Dave, I was like, you know what? Shut the hell up. I enjoyed it. That's what I did today. I enjoyed it. And that's okay. Right? Now,
that's healing.
I also know that hereditary, like I watched my grandfather literally work until the day he died, but he loved it. Like he couldn't, my grandfather passed when he couldn't do the things he wanted to do anymore. He couldn't get up. He couldn't go farm. He couldn't do these things or whatever. When his body was finally failing him, 2 days, and the man lived with congestive heart failure for like 15 years, like all that. And but as soon as he couldn't keep going anymore. So I've watched it and I see it in my family. Like it's a trait that a lot of men in my family have. It's like, we just don't know how to not work. Right? We have to be doing something.
So the trick, I am being told by people, is substitute the work in that last sentence for live. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I'm gonna, go ride my bike. I'm gonna take 2.5 hours. I'm gonna go ride my bike. That's doing something. That's not, is it a traditional, like an MBA would recognize that as work per se? No, but if you're working for yourself or you're working in a small organization with a group of friends where you have a maybe different kind of work environment, then that is in some regards just as important. To your point, deep thought, like the amount of time that I would spend, that I would have available on my calendar because I let it get this way, to actually let my brain relax a second and actually think about something, that was scant, in the day. And notionally, in the role I had, was like, that's your damn job. Well, wait a minute, something's at odds with that mission because
Right.
the lifestyle and my calendar say very different things.
Right.
But no, man, I totally, I know what you mean. Your January 13th sort of experience. Yeah, feel it.
So going with the effort of, finishing, what do you look at and think you can finish strong? And given the transition that you've got coming up, what's next for you? What are some of the thoughts you're looking at as like, I think that's something that I can start and finish pretty soon. Where's that headed?
So, as my time at Salesforce closes out, I've been thinking about what is it I actually like to do, right? If this was sort of 10 years ago, let's say, and suddenly I'm like, oh, I got to go get a new job. And I would just double down and immediately go get a new product job. Like, all right, I'm going to get a product job. Off I go. But now I'm actually like, okay, well, I mean, sure, I could do that, but I don't have to do that. I can do something else. And then it's like, Tom Hanks and Big for a second in the Toy Story. Like, what am I going to do? Like, he'd like run around and jump on the pianos and what have you. But then like, it starts to coalesce into like, what do I like? Actually, what do I actually enjoy about this? And for me, it is helping other people avoid the rocks that I've tripped over. It is helping organizations express a narrative around really difficult topics like identity management. Identity management in and of itself, the thing I like to do. So I'm kicking around some ideas around the ways that I can actually meld those things where it's not just strictly speaking, hey, I'm going to go do a new product job full time. And it's also taking into account, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but we're kind of in different times, right? And, organizations are saying, look, the economy is weird, right? And that has significant impact to how we hire or how we fund divisions, right? Like, hey, we hire a chief product officer, but you'll have no staff. Like, wait, hold on. Right? So it's those kinds of things where it's like, okay, well then how do you take that into account? And, also how do I fold into that a recognition of balancing the, I want to do, as in I want to create or co-create with people something. But at the same time, I also want to kind of try out working for myself. And that means not just sort of in a, how am I going to earn some dollars, but also just like well, what if that meant like I did get a little bit more selfish with my time? What if and that's a weird way of expressing it. It's not necessarily a healthy way of expressing it. Yeah. How do I be like, no, you know what? I am going to do, I'm going to get to this mileage mark a week on my bike. In order to do that, I need this much time. Okay, I'm going to reserve that time because that's important. And being comfortable and being in a setting where I can do that. And I don't know, formative ideas. There's a website. There's like some like moo cards apparently flying their way to me. We'll see. Like by the time Vegas rolls around, we'll see. But I don't know. I'm hearing a lot of I'm talking to folks that I've known in the industry, and I'm hearing a lot of interesting sort of feedback of like, yeah, times are different. And actually, we can maybe offer our capabilities in more cost-effective ways to companies that normally wouldn't be able to get this kind of experience or access to this kind of experience or skill set. Folks that have come out of identity finding a similar sort of outcome, and you're like, there's maybe something to this. So yeah, it's an interesting journey. I also have moments of like sheer and utter terror where I'm just like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And, I'm still task seeking. So I've been binging my way through the PC port of Gods of War. I'm just not going to lie about that. Like I too need something to do and feel accomplished about. So like, it's a blend, my friend. It's a blend.
Welcome. Listen, I'm a couple of months ahead of you, and it's you know what? It's not so bad over on this side, right? Trust me, there are days of those terror moments like, what the fuck am I doing?
But here's the thing, you have those moments even if you're in a classic work environment. You just have them differently.
You do. I think what I enjoy so much more now is that I have the time to fully process that moment.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When that moment hits me and I'm like, I have the time to sit there and go, okay, what am I feeling? And for my listeners, sorry, this turned into a therapy session, but oh well, this is what you get. Identity Jedi, we give you everything here. But I have the time to look at that and go, okay, what is this? What is really driving this? How do I feel about this? And also it just made me one of those days I was like, you know what? Cool. I'm gonna chill out for about an
Yeah.
hour. Go let's go let this process, right? And I realize now it has made me, like I've hinted at this for a while, and we're almost close to where I'll finally like kind of announce what the plans are and what's happening. But it's building up to that. I've also realized that no matter what happens going forward, I am a lot more protective of my time and my mental space and well-being, right? Not to get too fine a point on it, but just having that time to be able to, something happens, okay, I'm in work mode, we're going. And then, whether it's frustration or that terror, like protecting that time to go, oh, well, let me process this. What does
Yep.
this mean? Let me really think about what this is. And to your earlier point, it's just you get into work and it's the job. It's meeting after meeting after meeting, respond, do this, do this, do this. And I was so attuned to just getting it done and working and getting through it. That you're looking around, everybody's doing it. So you're like, all right, cool. Right. And I think now that I've had a chance to kind of step back and look at that, I'm like, yeah, there's,
Not every day should be like you are a short order cook at the breakfast rush. Like,
yeah,
not every
sure.
day should be like that. Sure as hell felt like that, certainly, for weeks on end. You're like, oh no, it's just a bad period. Like,
Right.
we'll get through this and get to some clean air. Like, nope, no, this is it. And like, yeah, you can do it. And you can produce great things doing it. And for people who love doing that, more power to you. That's great. But I think, what you're expressing, some of the things that I'm processing through are like, I know I can do that. Like, if you really want to test me, yeah, sure. Of course I can do that.
Right.
But I'm going to choose not to do that. And I'm going to bet that I can be as successful as I was before in a different way. And I'm going to change a little bit of what I'm doing. And that does not devalue me or my accomplishments or the things I've yet to do. But it takes a certain sort of faith that that's true. And I am nervous that faith is coming from a place of privilege. And I'm cognizant of that. I don't yet know how to process it all, but I'm certainly cognizant of it.
Yeah. I'll share this, and I don't think I know I've talked about it a little bit on this pod, kind of what happened after January 12th, but like, to that extent, I had, so January 12th, Sex Ed Soul, and it wasn't the nicest of acquisitions, right? So not all of them are. And, we're beginning of the year, and then it kind of starts this, where we are now with the market where, people are, layoffs everywhere, people are struggling. And I'm, I walk away from that. People are hitting me up, Dave, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Like, come here. I'm like, I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm good. Like, I literally on that day, like the next day, it happened. I'm on a flight to San Francisco, and I'm going out there to go hang out with some friends, things like that, or whatever. So the weekend hits, and I get this really bad moment on Saturday of just feeling like shit, to be honest, because I'm like, okay, this just happened. I know, some of my team members are now trying to figure out where they're going to go and what their next thing is. And I am in San Francisco, overlooking the city, hanging out with friends. Like, I'm going to be fine. I don't have and I don't say that to say like I'm not like hugely independently wealthy. I'm not. I've made some smart decisions. I made a lot of dumb ones too. But like, I had enough where I didn't have to worry about anything for a good couple of months before it really got to. I was like, and I remember talking to my best friend, and later I called my therapist, because this is really my therapist. This was really hitting me. It was like, I feel like shit. I should be doing something. I should and my best friend says, what are you going to do? Like, you can't. Are you going to go create like 10, all these jobs for these people? I was like, no. I was like, but right now, she was like, there's nothing you can do. It's okay that you feel this way, but like, you've got to separate this feeling of, and for me, I've never thought I was better than anybody. That's just never a thought that's in my head. Cultural background, we get all that crap later, but it's just, I'm always fighting for like everybody else in the next thing. And so to think that at any given time, if something happens, like I'm in a better position than somebody else, doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't. And I don't, I mean, 2 or 3 days, like I just couldn't sleep. It was just, and finally I just had to get to a point where I was like, you're going to have to be okay with it, right? Like that you're okay. And it's not a bad thing. And yeah, it was a very weird feeling that, I mean, even, to this day now, I'm still like, I check on a lot of people, and most people have found and found a place to go, and I'm happy for them. And it kind of led me to what I've always known was there. I've always had this sense of service and community, and wanting to make sure that everybody kind of succeeds together. And it's, plays out in a lot of the things that I do, a lot of things that I talk about, the things that I've done on the side, what I've done with like financial business. Like I've always wanted to make sure that like, if I can in any way, I'm going to give anybody I know and any people I don't know as many tools as they can to be successful. Because I can't do it for them. If I could, I probably would, and I'd probably run myself into the ground trying. But what I can do is try and give them what I do know, and try and make things as easy as possible for anybody else that looks to this. And so, yeah, it's interesting, right? That you get to a point where you're like, that there is a privilege that you have, and it just doesn't, for some of us who like who've never had that, it's like a dirty word coming out of your mouth. I was like, what? No, I don't. And you look around and go, well, I guess. Oh, yeah. Shit.
Oh, wait, is this what this is? That definition? Oh, crap. Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. A
little surreal. So, just so like all the people that follow this for actual identity stuff don't like.
I was about to say, like, we are so late on identity content. There's like a little identity outrage up front, and then not. So, like, all right, we gotta throw something in for the home listener here,
right? We gotta give them something. State of identity, the way you see it.
Oh, just a general topic.
Go with me. I've got some a little deeper.
You lead, I follow.
So, combining what you've seen with the growth of IDPRO and some things that you've seen, like you talked about, like the survey, what you've seen from the product side, and just general, either talking to customers, other people, looking at all of that, where do you see it? Where do you see the state of identity right now? And do you feel that a shift is coming in the way that we both look at it and the way that it's executed?
So one thing that I think we are in a transitional set of moments. And I think that transition is where in the past, and it's not the deep past, but the past, workforce identity was more admin time sets of controls, classic identity governance and administration, user provisioning. This is the world that I came out of. And single sign-on federation to facilitate experience. Meanwhile, SIAM partner identity was more runtime, just in time, provision access as we go, and make some authorization decisions on the fly. Far less admin time. And I think what I think I am seeing is that is changing, and that admin time controls are becoming less and less important, because the birthright provisioning is still critical. Still gotta like give you the day zero, day one experience, and you still need tools to turn people off, right? To shut them down. Ask me when your best friend deprovisions you. That's an emotional experience. That'll be on the cut reel. But the thing that I think, and look, I fully acknowledge those of you who've read the things I've written in the past. This is what I'm about to say is probably going to sound heretical, but like I'm becoming a little bit of a access certification and IGA nihilist, in that I think it is actually impossible to build an entitlement catalog. I think that it is too complex. The aggregation of privilege is too complex in most organizations to define useful catalogs to then facilitate things like meaningful access certification versus just rubber stamping, for example. I think it's difficult but straightforward to do birthright type work. And then everything else needs to start to feel like a more runtime decision and a more just-in-time decision. Whether this is a resurgence of new kinds of capabilities around authorization, or it is, I think, maybe thinking differently about what are the roles of some of these tools and how should you use them and what's a reasonable amount to use them at. We would always say, like, don't try to automate everything when it comes to provisioning. You'll never get that done, and there's no point. Search for the high value, high volume, high velocity apps, focus automation there. Fine. But I think now it's even a refinement of that, which is like, and also question why you're going beyond birthright in access management. So I think the moment I feel like we're in is this transitory moment where the majority of the identity world is shifting towards more runtime, just-in-time things. And I think this is, speaking in sort of like organization and enterprise identity. I think on the other sort of major topics, transitional moment where there's a lot of, hey, how do I get to a place where I just use my mobile phone for like everything, right? How does that become my sets of credentials, my identification, my government issued stuff, my payment? It already does that, but like, how does it become everything?
Right.
Super interesting. I think there is a there. I have concerns that the there people are focusing on is not necessarily the most productive one, which is to say, there's a lot of talk about open wallets and standardization of wallets, or maybe not standardization of wallets, and what Europe is doing with eIDAS and the open wallet sort of needs that they cite. And I think they're confusing their desire to break up big tech and the need for interoperable things. So think about it this way. You go into, whether it's a street market on the streets of Bangkok or into Macy's, and you look at wallets. They come in all shapes and sizes, no matter where you are. Wallets are not standardized. Guess what is? The credit card shape. The thing that goes in the wallet is standardized.
Right.
So I have a lot of questions about this, which I'm going to be coming to some of these shows and trying to learn more about. My own personal opinion is active clients, whether it's your mobile operating system or your browser, your password manager, and maybe digital wallets, have a much bigger role to play than they're currently doing. But that's also part of my talk at EIC and Identity. So you'll have to stay tuned for that. I'll put the recording up as soon as I get one of them. But yeah, I mean, that's where my identity brain is right now. And some of this like kind of hurts to say, because as an analyst, I made a career doing the admin side of things. And that's how I grew up, if you will, in the identity world. And now I'm like, sometimes too much of a good thing is not a good thing. And maybe the boundaries of, when you shift from admin time controls to runtime controls is a little more nuanced than just, are you dealing with workforce or are you dealing with customers, right? Like, and I haven't grappled totally with that, but that's just, I'm starting to see pieces land that way. So.
Okay. And shift is always good, right? I think I always looked at this industry and where we started with that a heavy focus on administration. And I was like, this is where we start, because we have to get our minds around this.
Mm-hmm.
So what started was you go into an organization and it's like, I don't know what's where. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Right. No clue. So if you can show me where my Linux accounts are, awesome. Thank you. Right.
Fantastic.
That's where we started. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, heavy on admin controls, and I find it interesting. So to me, this was always a natural shift and more so evolution of where we would go. Like once we understood that, we would start to move towards, okay, now what we can do with this. And so I find it interesting but I shouldn't, because everybody's always resistant to change. But as we start to go through the shift, because I agree, I think we are seeing a shift in where identity is going. It's interesting to see the friction to that. A lot of people have made a lot of money in administration, and they want to hold on to some of that for reasonable concerns. I get it, but I don't think I had a conversation at RSA, and I won't name names, but we went to lunch and he was like, I want to get your opinion on something. And this is a gentleman who's made it his life to make governance a real thing. And he says, where do you see this going? I said, honestly, can I give you my honest opinion? It's like, I think governance disappears in less than 3 years. I think in the aspect that it is now, like, it doesn't exist. I was like, because it's all just a rubber stamp. And for the most part, I was like, if I understand who you are and I understand your session and what you're using, like the active runtime decisions on like what you have and what you've had access to and policies running around that, I can pretty much attest like what you have and what you can get access to at that moment. Because if we actually think about what we're trying to stop, it's like, I don't necessarily care what Ian is supposed to have access to. I care what Ian actually has access to and what he can do, right? And so if we build and focus around that, like, is there really a need to certify? Well, Ian's account was supposed to look like this. No, I can certify at this time and date. Here's what Ian has access to. Here's the policy that granted him this access. And at that point, I can continue to enforce that he always has that access or she has that access, whatever I want to do.
The problem you run square into is the A word.
Which one?
Auditors.
Okay. I'm like,
the ghost of SOX says, like checklist auditor says annual review of access or quarterly review of access or whatever it is.
Right.
And you've got to deal with the reality of checkbox audits. And that isn't necessarily pragmatic or the most effective, but it's a reality. Like you can't just wish that away.
Right.
Now, how you change that, right? How do you change a mindset from you need to account for everything and who has it, to you need to document the controls that dynamically govern people from doing the bad things or the things that we deem are inappropriate for these roles. That is a shift in technology and deployment and in mindset, and even more so in a auditory regulatory compliance framework that does not exist necessarily in our world, right? If you think about risk tests for financial institutions, they do have some concepts like this. But, we still have a fairly binary kind of approach to, regulatory controls when it comes to identity. And I think this is like one of the last bastions of that, which will probably be the most difficult to change because in theory, your auditors and your internal risk teams ought to be the most risk adverse. Their job is to conserve the precious resources of the organization. And there is good reason for that. Proving that you can achieve it in a way that doesn't look like things they've done before, that's the actual hard part. And demonstrating, like, does method A, let's say traditional IGA access certification, retire more risk than method B, a just-in-time policy and authorization engine? Prove that. I don't know how you go about doing that. To be fair, I haven't spent enough time going about and figuring out how to do that. But like that is going to be the next hurdle to clear. If this transformation, like you say it's a 3-year roadmap, I'll come back to you in 3 years. We'll see how you did. But, if that's the case, then one of the biggest things is that change, the mindset and way you are being measured by internal and external audit and risk.
Yeah. And I'm always the first person to point out my blind spots. I don't know that world of like the auditors and what they expect and how difficult it would be to change that. That there is an aspect of this. When I started to think about this and talk through this, I'm like, it's very much getting down to the point like, what are we trying to accomplish with this? So this is what we're actually trying to do and stop and prevent. Okay, so if we can start there, and then we work backwards from there. And what does that mean? It does hit a lot of roadblocks when it comes down to, well, auditors expect this, and this has to do that. And if they don't see this, then it doesn't matter if it doesn't do this. It has to look like this. It's okay. Well, how do we? If I were to able to say, okay, well, at runtime and policy, I can show you to where, and I can do an test at with the time that Ian goes to go get access. Well, here's what he has access to based on this policy. Here's what he has. And these are the things that Ian can and can't do. And is there a way that I can go from there that says, okay, well, then I can attest to that and have it signed off on and says, okay, I know at any given time, Ian can never do these things. And maybe it's a backwards from there that says, okay, based on this, Ian's privileges should look like this. And I talk back to my traditional system that says, here's how Ian's supposed to look. And those two actually, that cycle actually works and they feed into each other, which I think is one of the things with like IGA and call it access management authorization. These two things, it's not a continuous cycle. It's like a broken cycle. And there's this gap where
Well,
IGA says this, and then it kind of happens, and then something then
yeah, I
changes
think,
made, and IGA sees it, and it's like, but in that gap, so many things can happen.
sure. I think the problem is we don't even have that. We don't have an eventually consistent model of authorization. We have two different sort of policy domains and tooling domains, and they share one and only one thing, which is the data subject, the user account.
Yes.
And beyond that, there isn't a flowing cycle that says, I have described a policy in, say, a PBAC tool or in a federation tool about access. Eventually, I need that to find its way back through the governance loop to validate that was true and or amend the individual's access to come into line so that there are no variants, but do that automatically in an autonomous fashion. So we don't have eventual consistency of authorization and privilege. And that would be a fantastic world. What's interesting was, who was I talking? Oh, I was talking to one of the old co-founders of Waveset and SailPoint. And I was like, I remember that I had this idea years ago. He's like, oh, dude, you got to dig it up. You got to publish that thing. I'm like, okay, all right, I'll go find it. And I did. And it was about using negative policies in the use of governance. Like, instead of trying to say, like, you should have this, why don't you just define what you shouldn't have? Like, which seems like kind of thing. My God, the people rolled out. Now, granted, I wrote this thing like 15 years ago. It was actually my interview essay for Burton Group. Like, yeah, it's like, it's mom putting up the fingerprint art on the fridge. You're like, oh, God, don't do that. But I did because, whatever. No sense of shame. Oh my God, the people that rolled out, who we know, were like, this is a horrible idea. And I'm like, well, I didn't say it was a good one, but it's at least one to consider and then reevaluate. Like, is it still horrible? I don't know. Like, I'm not entirely convinced. But to your point, if you're not willing to at least go back to the horrible ideas and then like every so often take them off the shelf and be like, wow, is this thing still crap? Like, oh yeah, no, that's a crap idea. And some of them are gonna be like, it is a crap idea, but flip it on its head. What does it look like? Oh, it looks like it fits the kind of space I had. So if nothing else, getting into that practice, it's just much harder in a corporate environment where the ability to sort of play with failure to find new success is not often tolerated, let's say. You don't have those affordances.
Yeah. Despite, what's written on the corporate website, innovation and fast failure sometimes isn't tolerated as much as it's marketed to be. Sometimes.
Oh, you have failureless innovation. What's your problem? Aren't every single one of your ideas like just the bestest? Come on, man.
Listen, I mean, so me and Matt Topper have gone back and forth about creating this website of like just all the crazy ideas that we come up with that we know we have absolutely no time to even like. Just the fact that we spent time coming up with the idea was probably a waste of our time in the first place because we got other things we need to do. And we're like, we should just document this stuff somewhere. Just go. I forgot what we said we were going to call it. So Matt, if you're listening to this, text me. I forgot what we said we were going to call it. But basically, like go get rich, whatever. Because we come up with these ideas. It's like, this would actually be a really good idea. I have no time to build this. I have no time to do anything else. We just post them out there and say, people, just come grab them. Come grab them, go forth, run. You're welcome. Right.
This is why I always think I am not going to be like a good founder someday because I have this kill zone in my head where no thought gets out without running through this like gauntlet. And like very few things make it out. And then the ones that survive are all riddled with holes and whatnot. I go to somebody else, they're like, oh yeah, so-and-so's doing around. I'm like, son of a gun. But like the number that just like absolutely gets strafed into a billion pieces in my brain. It's just like, probably should write those down. Same kind of thing of like, someone could pick up the broken ass pieces of this thing and do something with it. Cause I don't think I'm gonna, but I'm just not wired to do that right now.
All right, sir. Well, look, we went over about 15 minutes over. So I want to be respectful of your time. But thanks for coming and hanging out, man. This was
Man, thank you for having me. It was an honor and a pleasure and super fun. And I look forward to seeing you in person soon.
yeah, in 28 days to be.
So, which reminds me, I haven't submitted my slides yet. Were they due? I don't.
So listen, I pulled the entire RSA card. I was like, look, hey, Andy, I'm gonna get through this week. I got a lot to do, but I did tell him I would get him the draft slides this week. But I'll be working on my talk all this week anyway.
I'm sure. Yeah. You and me both are actually doing the same thing. Like every morning I wake up, I look at them, I'm like, I work on a deck until I hate it. Once I hate it, then I'm like, it's ready to ship. Went through an early, I hate this. I'm like, no, it's way too soon for that. Like kept going now. I'm like, ooh, I kind of like it. I'm like, oh crap. What if I just like this one? What does that mean? Like, it's like my internal quality sensor is like, unless you hate it, don't ship it. I'm like, crap, I don't know what to do. So I better ship to Andy something. I better ship the Identiverse content share something, especially because the other content reviewer is someone who lives, I don't know, like a mile from my house. And I probably ought to get something done because I don't want to end up on that individual's backlist either. So we are going to the deny list of like people that you should piss off are never content shares ever. I need to make amends on that one. So I will go do that. I promise, Andy, if you're listening, you'll get a deck. Certainly by the time you hear this, probably.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks. This has been
All right, my friend.
The Identity Jedi Show. We will see you guys on the next episode. Until then, be kind to each other, be good to each other, love each other. Identity Jedi out.
Thanks for listening to the Identity Jedi Show or watching the Identity Jedi Show if you're checking us out on YouTube. Hey, make sure you go to theidentitijedi.com and you can log into the Identity Jedi universe. You can get access to the newsletter, which comes out every week. You can get all the latest episodes of the podcast. We've got blogs, everything that you would think of about identity. We got it for you. theidentitijedi.com. Please make sure to like, rate, and subscribe on whatever platform you listen to this on. Comment, engage. Let us know what you're thinking, how you're enjoying the podcast. And if you've got some ideas for some guests, let me know. Until next time, take care.